Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're embarking on a really remarkable journey into Chinese history. We want to understand the extraordinary life of its very last emperor. Our sources for this deep dive, they range from, historical accounts to a truly unique autobiography from the emperor himself. Our goal is to go beyond just the historical timeline and truly explore the profound personal transformation of this man. His identity was just constantly reshaped by the dramatic upheavals of his nation. We'll trace his path from absolute imperial power
Yeah.
to utter powerlessness and eventually to becoming just a common citizen.
Yeah, and what's particularly compelling here is the chance to delve into what we might call the king's mind.
Hmm.
We're not just looking at facts, but really at the deep psychological impact of being such a powerful symbol in a world that was, well, radically reinventing itself around him.
So what can you, our listener, take away from all this? Well, you're about to witness how external forces can profoundly redefine an individual's entire existence. And perhaps how resilience, or maybe just sheer circumstance, plays a critical role in survival. Okay, let's unpack this incredible story. So, to truly grasp the world Puyi was born into, we really need to understand the colossal weight of the Chinese imperial system. Can you sort of set the stage for us, paint a picture of China's ancient empire?
Absolutely. If we look at the historical context, China's imperial system stood for over 2,000 years. That's far longer than many Western empires, like, say, Britain's, which was around 1,000 years. Chinese emperors were revered as Tianqi, or sons of heaven. This belief, in divine appointment gave them absolute unquestionable authority, a sense of being above all earthly concerns.
And at its height, this empire wielded immense power, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. From roughly 1500 to 1800, China was arguably the world's leading economic power, or certainly one of the top two. Their exports, especially things like tea, silk, porcelain, they were incredibly sought after by Western nations.
Yet even the most formidable empires can start to show cracks. Where did China's vulnerability first become apparent?
Well, this period raises a crucial question. How does such a dominant power find itself vulnerable? It's a narrative many Asian nations shared during the colonial era, actually. The British, they were intent on opening China to wider trade, and they introduced opium. This led to just widespread addiction affecting everyone from laborers right up to the nobility.
And this destructive trade, it ultimately ignited a major conflict.
Precisely, the Opium Wars. China suffered defeats in both conflicts, largely due to a significant technological gap in military capability. The consequences were severe. Britain gained control of Hong Kong as a crucial trading port,
Right.
and foreign powers established these legation quarters, special zones in Beijing and other port cities for their embassies and businesses, effectively creating foreign enclaves within Chinese territory.
So a powerful empire now weakened, still under an imperial system, but with the emperor's true power seemingly diminished. This really sets the stage for a pivotal figure in Puyi's early life. Our sources frequently highlight Empress Dowager Cixi as a central figure in China's decline. She held immense power, essentially pulling the strings through several emperors, right?
Exactly. She was a staunch conservative, famously resistant to Western influence. She was clinging to the belief that China could overcome foreign powers on its own terms, and critically, she was the one who personally selected Puyi to be the next emperor.
How old was Puyi when she made this fateful choice? This is where it gets really interesting.
Well, Puyi was born in 1906. Cixi chose him in 1908, meaning he was barely 2 years old, almost 3. Her criteria were pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
She wanted someone not sensible, basically someone she could easily control as a figurehead.
Wow. A puppet on the throne at such a tender age. So what happened when they brought him to the Forbidden City?
Well, Puyi, who'd been living with his father, the brother of the previous emperor, was brought to this vast and frankly rather intimidating palace. He himself actually recorded his distress.
Oh, really?
Yeah, crying uncontrollably upon seeing the aged Cixi. She reportedly just dismissed him, saying something like, take him away, he's annoying."
Huh. But then, a sudden turn of events.
Just 2 days later, Cixi died. This created an immediate power vacuum. However, her choice of Puyi stood. The coronation was swiftly organized.
Can you even imagine a 3-year-old on the dragon throne?
He was restless, crying, wanting to go home. His father, Zaifeng, had to kneel beside him, trying to hold him still. And it's recounted that to calm Puyi, his father whispered, don't cry, it'll be over soon." The eunuchs and officials who were there were reportedly terrified,
I bet.
wondering if that meant the ceremony would be over soon or, maybe the dynasty itself.
Hmm.
As history unfolded, it was definitely the latter.
Okay, so after Shixi's death, the effective power shifted to Empress Longyu, the wife of the previous emperor. But she lacked Cixi's iron will, didn't she? And China just descended further into chaos.
Yeah, exactly. With the empire clearly weakening and foreign powers exerting pressure, internal rebellions were just rampant. Long Yu felt she had no choice but to call upon this powerful former general Yuan Shikai. He commanded his own army and showed leanings towards Western ideas.
She put her trust in him, but it sounds like he had his own ambitions brewing.
Indeed. Yuan Shikai initially played hard to get, feigning illness, claiming food sickness, or a sore leg to maximize his leverage. When they pressed him, he demanded to return as premier, with absolute authority and resources from the court. Long Yu, feeling cornered, ultimately agreed.
And then the betrayal. It unfolded pretty quickly.
Yes. Yuan Shikai went behind her back to negotiate with Sun Yat-sen, the leader of the revolutionary movement. Sun Yat-sen, well, he acknowledged that his own forces weren't quite strong enough for a decisive victory. So they agreed to a deal. Yuan Shikai would secure the emperor's abdication, and in return, Yuan would become the first president of the new republic.
So Yuan Shikai goes back to the Forbidden City, but with a very different message for the Empress this time.
Puyi's autobiography vividly recounts this. Yuan Shikai tearfully informing Empress Long Yu that the rebellion was unstoppable. He dramatically warned her that if the Qing dynasty didn't abdicate, they'd suffer the same bloody fate as the French monarchy, beheaded like in France.
Wow.
And this fear of the French Revolution's brutal end, it genuinely unnerved many Asian royals at the time.
So despite objections from other nobles, Long Yu made the decision.
Yes, she unilaterally signed the abdication on Puyi's behalf. He was still only about 6 years old. However, it wasn't quite a total capitulation for the imperial family.
Right. The abdication came with this unique set of terms, the Articles of Favorable Treatment. What were the key conditions of this surprising agreement?
Well, the most significant ones were, first, Puyi kept his imperial title, though he lost all political power.
Okay.
Second, he and his family could continue to live right there in the Forbidden City. Third, all the imperial property and treasures remained theirs. And fourth, they'd receive a substantial annual stipend from the new government.
So on the surface, it sounds like a life of luxury, just without the burdens of actually ruling. Was it really as appealing as it seemed?
It appeared so, maybe initially, but Puyi's memoir reveals this agreement became a kind of double-edged sword.
Yeah.
It ironically isolated the imperial family even further from the common people, from the realities of the outside world. It effectively turned the Forbidden City into a sort of gilded cage, a prison they imposed on themselves.
What was Puyi's day-to-day life actually like as a 6-year-old former emperor inside those walls?
He describes a life of extreme privilege, absolutely, but also profound loneliness. He had personal attendants for literally everything. Bathing, dressing, even buttoning his clothes. He wore a brand new outfit every single day. Apparently, the emperor was forbidden from wearing the same clothes twice.
Wow. And the meals, I understand they were quite an extravagant affair.
Oh, incredibly so. There were no set meal times. He just had to tell a eunuch he was hungry.
Right.
And the order would be immediately sent to the kitchen. Each meal involved at least 25 dishes. The palace consumed, get this, an average of 8 tons of pork every month.
8 tons.
8 tons. Puyi himself noted only 3 or 4 dishes were actually eaten. The rest was just for display, served on a separate show table to maintain that imperial grandeur.
But despite all this opulence, he was still intensely isolated.
Very much so. He was effectively separated from his mother and siblings. They could only visit much later. He was surrounded by servants, not genuine playmates or parental figures. His education was strictly traditional. Chinese literature, Confucianism, no Western subjects at all initially. He describes this period as just one of profound loneliness, completely trapped by custom and ritual.
Did he ever manage to get a glimpse of the world beyond the Forbidden City walls?
Yes, eventually. At around 14, he finally got a foreign tutor, an Englishman named Reginald Johnston. Johnston taught him English and Western ideas. He apparently grew quite close to Johnston, and it was a significant opening to the outside world for him.
Then, at 16, he faced another traditional imperial event, marriage.
Yeah, Puyi himself stated he had zero personal interest in marriage, but dynastic rules absolutely required it. So the palace elders selected 4 candidates, sending these small, what he called ID-sized photos. Puyi, claiming he couldn't really tell them apart, just sort of pointed at 2. Interestingly, his first choice, a woman named Wen Shi, was actually rejected by the elders. They preferred one wrong.
And once chosen, these women were essentially locked into their fate, weren't they? No backing out.
Exactly. They were forbidden from marrying anyone else. Since he'd indicated 2, he was married to both simultaneously. Wan Rong became empress, and when she became consort.
What about the wedding night? There's quite an anecdote about that in the sources.
Yes, Puyi recounts entering the bridal chamber, finding one wrong veiled, waiting for him. He simply lifted her veil, looked at her face, and then promptly turned around and left. Did nothing else.
Really?
That's what he wrote. And this pattern, or rather lack of a pattern, continued throughout his marriages to both women. No marital relations ever took place, apparently, though they would reportedly play together during the day since they were all still quite young.
This complete lack of intimacy, well, it certainly fueled a lot of speculation over the years, didn't it?
It absolutely has. It's become a significant point of discussion. There are basically two main theories regarding Puyi's sexuality. One theory points to childhood trauma. Palace staff apparently suggested that as a very young boy, eunuchs, trying to get him to sleep, would send young palace maids to sort of play games with him until he was exhausted. This experience, it's argued, might have left him with a deep aversion to women.
Hmm.
The second theory, which comes from the autobiography of Sun Yat-ting, he was the last surviving eunuch who served Puyi in one wrong, states it was pretty much common knowledge in the palace that Puyi preferred eunuchs over women. Sun Yat-ting used this Chinese phrase, not liking water, liking land, meaning he preferred male rather than female companions.
And there's a specific eunuch mentioned in connection with this theory, isn't there?
Yes, Wang Fengxi. He was described as being beautiful and quite feminine-looking from a young age. He was reportedly abused by older eunuchs before becoming Puyi's close attendant. He was apparently inseparable from Puyi until the emperor eventually left the Forbidden City.
Now, Puyi's Western tutor, Reginald Johnston, he encouraged him to try and bring some reforms to the palace. What was his first target?
His first major target was the eunuchs themselves. At its absolute peak, the Forbidden City, which is huge, about 400 acres, housed nearly 100,000 eunuchs.
100,000.
Incredible number. By Puyi's time, there were still over 2,000. These were often very poor boys, castrated young, around 8 or 9 years old, usually by their parents, hoping for a chance at a secure, maybe even influential, life inside the palace.
And what was the central problem Puyi saw with them by his time?
Well, many of them were deeply corrupt. They were notorious for smuggling priceless imperial treasures out of the palace. They'd sell them to antique dealers. I mean, the Forbidden City contained 2 millennia of uncatalogued wealth. It was an easy target.
So Puyi, trying to curb this, ordered an inventory to find out what was actually there.
Yes, precisely. He instructed the eunuchs to create a comprehensive list of everything in the imperial treasuries. And the very next day, a treasury roughly the size of a tennis court, filled with gold, silver, porcelain, priceless paintings. It inexplicably burned to the ground.
Huh. A fire that happened to be incredibly convenient, you might say, given the circumstances.
Exactly. Puyi was convinced it was arson, set by the eunuchs to cover their tracks. Although Sun Yat-ting, the eunuch, later claimed it was just an accidental electrical fire, saying the palace wiring was ancient and faulty, but the timing. Oh, it was certainly suspicious, to say the least.
So did Puyi succeed in his reform efforts after that setback?
Not really, not with the inventory anyway. He basically gave up on that idea. Instead, he just fired most of the eunuchs, drastically reducing their number from over 2,000 down to just 200 or 300. A huge cutback.
Meanwhile, outside the palace walls, China remained incredibly volatile. Yuan Shikai had died by this point,
Yes.
leading to this period of fragmented power, warlordism, civil war.
Right. And amidst this chaos, a warlord named Feng Yuxiang seized control of Beijing. He viewed those articles of favorable treatment for Puyi as completely unfair, a drain on national resources, especially given the state of the country. So his troops then stormed the Forbidden City.
How did Puyi, who was about 18 by then, react to this sudden invasion of his protected world?
Well, the story goes it was 9 a.m., and Puyi was just eating an apple when a eunuch burst in, shouting that troops were at the palace gates. They issued this blunt ultimatum. The articles were null and void, and Puyi and his entire family had just 20 minutes to evacuate the Forbidden City.
20 minutes?
Yeah.
That's less time than it takes to watch a TV show.
He was incredibly abrupt. Puyi called his father, who advised him just to comply, not to resist. As Puyi was leaving the Forbidden City for good, walking past the soldiers, the leading officer apparently paused and asked him directly, "Mr. Puyi, will you be an emperor or a commoner from now on?"
Mr. Puyi, that must have been such a jarring shift from Your Majesty.
Absolutely. A stark reminder of his completely lost status. Puyi, under immense duress, just responded, "I will be a commoner." It was a pragmatic lie, as we'll see, but it secured his immediate escape. He, Wen Rong, and Wen Shu were driven away to his father's house, just outside the palace grounds.
But his stay at his father's house was brief, as I understand it. Where did he end up going next?
Yeah, very brief. Puyi quickly struck a deal with Japan. Like other Western powers, Japan saw the instability in China as a big opportunity for influence. They viewed Puyi as a potentially valuable asset, maybe a bargaining chip, in their strategic goals for the region.
So he sought, or perhaps more accurately, was offered Japanese protection.
Exactly. He first moved into the Japanese legation quarter in Beijing, then later to the Japanese concession area in Tianjin, where he's given a house called Jingyuan. He definitely understood he was being used as a tool, though he probably didn't grasp the full extent of Japan's long-term plan for him just yet.
How different was this life in Tianjin compared to the gilded cage of the Forbidden City?
Oh, remarkably different. He had significantly more freedom, for one thing. He'd go shopping, order Western goods suits, diamonds, cars, watches, radios, you name it. He funded this lifestyle partly by selling off some of those treasures the eunuchs had smuggled out years before.
Ah,
Deposited the money in foreign banks, lived off the interest. He even bought land in China to rent out for income. Quite the businessman in a way.
and how did his wives adapt to this new, more westernized, but still quite strange existence?
Well, he bought gifts for one wrong, but apparently when she would constantly demand equal treatment, leading to this sort of endless cycle of spending. It was also during this period in Tianjin that Puyi, whose Manchu heritage traditionally meant he wore a queue, the braid,
Right.
he cut it off and fully embraced Western dress and hairstyles. A big symbolic change.
Now, one of his wives, Wen Shu, she made a particularly dramatic and unprecedented decision during this time.
Yes, his secondary consort, Wen Zhu, filed for divorce. This was completely unheard of. Historians generally point to three main reasons for this. First, she deeply desired a real marital relationship, which Puyi, as we discussed, had never provided.
Right.
Second, there was constant conflict and intense rivalry with Empress Wanrong. And third, unlike Wanrong, Wen Shu wasn't really obsessed with imperial titles or status. She just genuinely yearned for a normal, happy life.
And what became of her life after the divorce? Did she find that normal life?
Well, Puyi granted the divorce, but perhaps pettily, stripped her of all her imperial titles, reducing her completely to a commoner. She later worked as a teacher and, amazingly, married a commoner who, by many accounts, had absolutely no idea she was a former imperial consort. The story that's widely circulated, especially online in China, is that she only revealed her true identity on her deathbed, whispering, "I was a princess," to her husband.
Wow. That's a truly compelling, almost theatrical twist to her personal story.
It absolutely is. It adds this layer of dramatic depth, doesn't it?
Meanwhile, what was the fate of Empress Wanrong? Her story takes a much darker turn.
Yes, tragically so. While Puyi was preoccupied with his Buddhist practices and, frankly, punishing eunuchs, Wanrong grew increasingly isolated and lonely. She began an affair with Puyi's chauffeur. Puyi eventually discovered them. Apparently, their bedrooms were right next to each other.
Oh, dear.
He immediately fired the chauffeur.
And then there was the pregnancy that resulted from the affair.
Yes, she became pregnant with the chauffeur's child. The Japanese, who were controlling things by then, allowed her to carry the baby to term. But tragically, after she gave birth to a daughter, they killed the infant.
Oh, how horrific.
It's just awful. This trauma, combined with her intense isolation, her growing hatred for the Japanese occupiers, and her profound grief over her child, it caused her to descend into madness.
That's just a truly heartbreaking series of events.
It really is. She apparently stopped bathing, neglected cutting her nails, just locked herself in her room. Eunuchs reported finding her naked, screaming on the floor. She also developed a severe addiction to opium, which only accelerated her mental decline. It was an incredibly tragic end to her story.
And her final moments after Japan's defeat.
After Japan's defeat in WWII, Wanrong was basically abandoned by Puyi and was captured by Chinese forces. Because she was Puyi's wife, and Puyi was now widely seen as a Japanese collaborator or traitor, the Chinese people largely despised her.
Right.
She was actually put on public display in a prison where people traveled from all over just to curse and insult her. Prison guards reported her alternating between states of delusion, believing she was still in the palace, and screaming desperately for opium. She ultimately died in prison, reportedly in horrific conditions, in a pool of her own waste. Her burial site remains unknown to this day.
Just awful. Okay, returning to Puyi in Tianjin, Japan finally revealed their full intentions for him, didn't they?
Yes, after about 5 or 6 years of him living under their protection, Japanese officials approached Puyi. They had successfully conquered Manchuria, which was, of course, the ancestral homeland of his Manchu family, and they wanted to establish it as a new, supposedly independent state called Manchukuo. They offered Puyi the throne, believing his Manchu heritage and his former imperial status would somehow legitimize this puppet nation in the eyes of the world and perhaps the Manchurian people.
And Puyi agreed, but he had a specific condition, didn't he?
He did. He insisted on being an emperor, not merely a president or a prime minister. He wanted the title. Japan, eager to leverage his symbolic power, readily agreed to this.
So he moved to Manchukuo, presumably believing he would truly regain some form of real power this time.
If he did believe that, he quickly realized the reality was very different. He was even more of a prisoner there in many ways than he had been in the Forbidden City. He lived in a palace, yes, but Japanese officials constantly monitored his every move. He became nothing more than a figurehead, a rubber stamp. His sole official duty was basically just to sign every single law the Japanese installed Manchukuo government sent him.
And some of those laws had incredibly harmful implications for the people living there, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. Historians largely agree that Puyi's compliance, his signature on these documents, inflicted immense damage. For example, one law he signed allowed the government to conscript Manchukuo citizens into forced labor in factories, directly supporting Japan's WWII war effort. His signature lent this veneer of legitimacy to these really oppressive measures.
What was Puyi's own mental state like during these 14 years in Manchukuo, operating as this puppet ruler?
His autobiography, My First Half of My Life, will paint a picture of a man consumed by two dominant emotions during this period. First, just an intense fear of death. He was terrified of being assassinated, maybe by the Japanese if he didn't comply, maybe by Chinese nationalists if he collaborated too much. He was trapped. This led him to extreme religiosity. He became a devout Buddhist, constantly praying, counting prayer beads, meticulously checking his horoscope every day. He even forbade his staff from killing any living creature, even flies or mosquitoes, because he believed it would somehow shorten his own life.
Wow.
Second, there was a growing paranoia and cruelty. His constant anxiety and frustration made him increasingly irritable, volatile. He became much harsher, punishing his eunuchs for even minor offenses, like Sun Yaoting breaking a plate that resulted in severe beatings and imprisonment for the poor guy. He'd even cut their food rations down to just gruel and yams. This led to his young eunuchs, even teenagers aged 18, appearing physically like 10-year-old children due to malnutrition and constant hard work. It sounds horrific.
Puyi's time as Emperor of Manchukuo, this strange chapter, it came to a very abrupt end with Japan's defeat in World War II in 1945.
Yes. With Japan's collapse, the state of Manchukuo just dissolved overnight. Soviet forces, who had been fighting Japan in the final stages of the war, swiftly moved in and captured Puyi.
Now, this sounds like a moment of extreme danger for him. He had, after all, actively collaborated with Japan.
You'd think so, right? But surprisingly, it wasn't the end for him. The Soviets, much like the Japanese before them, actually saw him as a potentially valuable asset. They treated him like a VIP, housing him in a comfortable sanitarium-like hotel. He even tended a vegetable garden there, apparently planted tomatoes.
Meanwhile, China, under the nationalists at this point, certainly wanted him back.
Oh yes, Chiang Kai-shek, leading the nationalist government, demanded Puyi's extradition. He explicitly stated he would execute him upon arrival in China.
So he was lucky the Soviets held on to him.
Extremely lucky. The Soviets refused Chiang's request.
But eventually he was indeed returned to China. How did that happen?
That occurred after Mao Zedong's Communist Party decisively defeated the nationalists in the Civil War. As fellow communists, Mao successfully negotiated Puyi's return from the Soviets in Russia. Puyi, by now in his late 40s or early 50s, looked visibly terrified stepping off the plane back in China, as if he fully expected to be marched off and executed immediately.
But Mao had an entirely different and perhaps even more audacious plan for Puyi, didn't he?
He really did. Mao's, well, genius tactic, you could call it, was to remodel Puyi. Instead of just executing him, which would have been the simple thing to do, Mao wanted to transform the most significant living symbol of China's entire feudal past into a productive, seemingly happy common citizen. This way, Puyi himself would become living proof of the Communist Party's power to re-educate and reform, a massive propaganda victory.
And so Puyi entered a re-education camp, not quite the execution he feared.
Exactly. For 9 years, he was held in a prison camp, specifically the Fusion War Criminals Management Center. Here, he was made to study Marxism and communism intensively, and he was forced to write these lengthy, detailed self-criticisms of his past actions, his imperial identity, everything.
It's quite a mental image, isn't it? A former emperor who never dressed himself, learning to live like a completely ordinary person.
It really is. It was here, at almost 50 years old, that Puyi learned the most basic life skills for the very first time. Things like brushing his teeth properly, buttoning his own clothes, tying his shoelaces, washing his own laundry. He was reportedly always late for roll calls because he genuinely struggled with simple tasks, like doing up buttons. He just couldn't manage it quickly.
Wow.
The communist method, broadly speaking, was to first devalue him through this constant self-criticism, make him feel utterly worthless for his past, and then indoctrinate him with the new ideology, presenting it as the only path back to regaining value and purpose in the new China.
And according to Mao and the party, this remodeling actually worked.
Well, Mao declared it a resounding success. Puyi was eventually released, returning to Beijing. He lived with relatives at first, and he described his newfound freedom, this ordinary life, as a profound revelation. He was apparently amazed by the simplest things, barbershops, stores, even taking the bus. He often got lost on his own and needed help finding his way home.
He even found employment.
Yeah.
What did he end up doing?
Yes, the Communist Party arranged work for him. Initially, as a gardener in Beijing's botanical garden, watering plants, sweeping paths. Later, he worked in a historical committee, part of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, contributing his unique knowledge as a former insider. Basically, a living historical archive.
And he even remarried later in life.
He did. He married a commoner woman, a nurse named Li Shuxian. While their marriage was also reportedly asexual, by all accounts it was a normal, caring partnership in his old age. His wife even wrote a book, My Husband Puyi, detailing his everyday life as this reformed commoner. She recounts a rather amusing anecdote about him being incredibly forgetful, understandable, perhaps, having never needed to remember anything thanks to attendance his whole life.
Right.
He'd serve himself rice in the cafeteria, put the bowl down at a table, then completely forget he had rice and go back to the counter asking for more.
So he genuinely became this living embodiment of their ideological triumph, a walking success story for the regime.
Exactly that. The Communist Party actively encouraged him to write his autobiography, From Emperor to Citizen, or My First Half of My Life, as it's often known. It covers his extraordinary journey from emperor to ex-prisoner. This book became official Chinese propaganda. It showcased how this ultimate symbol of feudalism could be reformed into a valuable, productive citizen under communism. Puyi became, in effect, a walking propaganda tool, attending state events, giving speeches about his transformation.
But even as this reformed citizen, his past still cast a very long shadow, didn't it? Especially during the tumultuous period of the Cultural Revolution later on.
Oh, absolutely. The Cultural Revolution, starting in the mid-60s, aimed to eliminate all remnants of the old feudal order, the Four Olds. And Puyi, despite his transformed life and party protection, was the ultimate symbol of that old order. He was a prime target for the Radical Red Guards.
Was he in direct physical danger during that chaotic time?
Well, Red Guards frequently broke into his home, harassing him. But he was fortunate, in a sense, to be protected by the Communist Party hierarchy itself, because he was such a valuable symbol for them. He apparently had a direct line, or could get messages to party officials, and police would be immediately dispatched to protect him from the mobs.
Yet he couldn't escape all the consequences of that extreme political climate.
No, he couldn't. He fell seriously ill with kidney cancer during this period. And tragically, many hospitals and medical staff, declaring themselves fervent Red Guards and actively opposing any perceived feudalistic elements, refused to treat him properly.
Seriously, refused treatment.
Yes. Even when he managed to get admitted to a hospital through high-level party intervention, he sometimes had to wait 12 hours or more without receiving any treatment, just left on a gurney.
So it seems very plausible that the prevailing political climate effectively shortened his life.
It's certainly a strong argument. He died of complications from kidney cancer and heart failure in 1967 at the age of 61. Arguably, he might have lived longer if he'd received consistent, proper medical care, uninterrupted by the political purges.
What an absolutely astonishing, tumultuous life. From a 3-year-old emperor on the dragon throne to a 50-year-old man learning how to button his own shirt in a re-education camp, Puyi's journey is truly unparalleled.
It really is. And this deep dive into his life, it raises a significant question for us, I think. When we examine historical figures, we often focus so much on their deeds, their actions, their impact on grand events. But what can delving into their internal world, their psychology, truly teach us about the decisions they made? even the ones that seem completely irrational from the outside.
Exactly. Like his cruelty towards the eunuchs in Manchukuo, or his later struggles with just simple memory tasks. It all makes so much more sense when you consider the king's mind, the incredible, isolating, terrifying circumstances he was under, rather than just looking at the king's history as a list of events.
Indeed. Understanding those profound internal pressures, the traumas, the transformations, it provides a much richer, more human understanding, not just of the historical events themselves, but of the very individuals, like Puyi, who were caught at their center.
This deep dive has just profoundly highlighted how circumstances can shape not just a life path, but an entire identity, often in ways we can barely even imagine. So for you, the learner, maybe consider this provocative thought as we wrap up. If an emperor, someone accustomed to absolute power and boundless privilege from infancy, can be stripped of literally everything, and then over time be remodeled into a common citizen, what does that really say about the true nature of identity? Is it some fixed, unchangeable entity we're born with? Or is it actually a much more fluid construct, constantly being shaped and reshaped by the world, the pressures, the ideologies around us? Thank you so much for joining us on this fascinating deep dive into a truly extraordinary life. We hope you've uncovered some surprising facts and gained some compelling new insights. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.